Joining me now, E.J. Antoni, Heritage Foundation economist, Unleashed Prosperity Hotline, David Malpass, former president of the World Bank, and North Dakota Senator Kevin Cramer. Mr. Cramer, you're very kind to join us, humble economists. And let me begin with you and ask you for your reaction to President Trump's reciprocal trade policy.
Well, Larry, I think, first of all, I think reciprocal policy is the most sensible because it really gets to the point of balance. You treat us well, we'll treat you well. We'll treat you as well as you treat us. And that's the ultimate in fairness. The one thing that I wonder about is there are other industrial policies besides tariffs that give advantages to countries like China who don't have any environmental compliance. We have the highest environmental costs, no labor compliance in terms of workplace, or in some cases they have slave labor. There are still many disadvantages in some of these countries. India would be another example. So to get to complete balance, I think we're gonna have to talk about some of these other things, but we can also bring some of our own costs down with the same issues like environmental compliance and other regulations.
You know, Senator, on that point, though, I mean, it gives Mr. Trump a very wide latitude, it seems to me.
It does.
I mean, you know, he's the art of the deal. He's a brilliant negotiator. Right. I mean, I think this has, you know, yes, level playing field in terms of reciprocity is a very straightforward metric. But I think it gives him plenty of negotiating room, you know, on tariffs, for example, perhaps on drugs, perhaps on national security.
Sure.
Yeah.
No question about it. There are lots of factors that go into it. This is only the first one. And by the way, let's face it, the time that he gives these countries to comply, you're going to see a lot of them comply. And so the bottom line is things are going to come down for everybody because most of them aren't going to want to take the tariff.
Well, that's an interesting point. E.J. Antoni, come to you on this. I'd like your reaction, but also what Senator Cramer just said. There are, I'm going to call it 45 days, I think 47 days to be exact, between now and the time the trade review is completed and the recommendations are made, as Howard Lutnick said, could go into place April 2nd for that matter. But, E.J., does that add uncertainty or not? Are you surprised the stock market went up so well? In general, how do you react to it?
Well, Larry, I think you could say it does add a certain amount of uncertainty, except that the uncertainty is just a question of, are things going to remain? So do we keep the status quo, or do things improve significantly? I mean, let's not forget, you're talking about countries that sometimes have 100% tariff rate on American products. And so if we can get those down by the president's threat of reciprocating a tariff or the equivalent thereof in terms of non-tariff barriers, you know, that's going to be a tremendous boon to American exporters. That's going to allow us to increase production, to increase employment and real wage growth, which is a very, very important topic considering the fact that real wages are down about 4% after the last 4 years. So all of these things, I think, are very, very positive developments, and that, I think, helps explain why the market rallied as much as it did today.
You know, if you do this right, you got some smart people around the president, you're going to get supply-side effects. You should get more production, more domestic production, better worker wages, real worker wages. I don't know. David Malpass, are you worried about the inflationary? I mean, every time you see the word tariff in the media, except of the few exceptions, this show, one of them, Breitbart, another. But every time you see the word tariff, you see the word inflation. And I just think that's an assertion that is thus far unproven.
I think you can overwhelm prices with production. And so Senator Cramer's right about the breadth of this initiative. If you think about industrial production and competitiveness by the U.S., it gets a big boost across the board. And as we saw today, there's talk of other countries lowering their tariffs. So that's actually a disinflationary factor for the whole global economy. You know, there's huge production capability. One other point, Larry, I think the stock market is seeing two good things that are becoming possible. One is into the war in Ukraine, and one is that the Democrats are doing so badly that we have to look forward to say Republicans could hold the House and Senate into the future because of the good policies now.
Yes, Democrats are barking up the wrong tree right now in virtually every place. How about that? You know, it's interesting, Senator Cramer. Our friend Dan Clifton from Strategas Research, their superb Washington watchers and brokers and research house, you know, he's been on the show talking about the Ukraine-Russia war premium on oil prices. I think that's a really important point. And I think what President Trump did yesterday was so dramatic and so positive, you know, cutting through the morass, going right to the point, and essentially launching a peace process. Trump launched a peace process yesterday with Putin and Zelensky, and he staffed it out with Marco Rubio and others. I mean, I haven't seen it yet, but that could drop the premium on oil prices, I don't know, $10 or so, $15. That's counterinflationary.
Well, for sure, Larry, anytime energy prices come down, that's the greatest thing you can do for inflation because all things are tied to energy one way or another, and in most cases, multiple ways. Having said that, we oftentimes forget the geopolitical ramifications of policy and the policy ramifications of geopolitics. And you're exactly right. First of all, it's just good news. And markets are emotional. They respond to good news. Peace itself is good news. But the fact that he has come out so strong, so quickly, and made such a difference on the world stage in a positive way, I think all of that creates trajectory that's going in the right direction.
Now, all that said, E.J. Antoni, the inflation numbers coming in are bad. All right, we've had several straight months of bad, including January's number, even today's producer price index. We got a couple of charts about the inflation. I think we have a 3, 6, and 12-month chart about inflation, and we also have a chart on the commodity boom. Yeah, look at the change in CPI. The year-to-year is about 3%. I can't quite see it, but the 6-month change is over 4%, and the 1-month change is nearly 6%. Very interesting. Wrong direction, E.J. Antoni. I mean, whatever the tariff story is, this is the wrong direction.
Larry, 100%. And what's interesting is that if you look at the year-over-year change in the CPI, for example, every month since the Fed cut interest rates last fall, the inflation rate has actually been accelerating. And so clearly the Fed was way too early to cut rates. They took their foot off the brake, stomped back on the gas. That was a huge policy mistake. We talked about it then and called it out as such. Unfortunately, though, you know, this is the Fed that President Trump is going to have to deal with. And so we kind of have, I think, fiscal and monetary policy at loggerheads at this point, where the Fed eased way too early. They did not draw down the balance sheet enough. You know, you can debate as to why they did that, whether it was the unrealized losses in the banking sector or trying to get their preferred candidate across the finish line in the presidential election. Whatever the case may be, they made the mistake. We're going to have to deal with the inflationary impacts this year, right now, and beyond. And we see that, you mentioned the commodity data. That's going to feed into the wholesale inflation numbers, which will then feed into the consumer inflation numbers. In other words, we still have more months of price increases ahead. And so all of this is going to put, obviously, upward pressure on prices.
Got to get through it. I want to just repeat this because I didn't see it, but I got the chart in front of me. The 12-month inflation rate, CPI, is 3.0%. However, the 3-month inflation rate, more recently, is 4.5%, okay? And the 1 month, which came out yesterday, 5.7%, almost 6%. And if I can, I want to show the commodity chart. The CRB Futures Commodity Index, which is an inflationary indicator, that thing is up over 20% year on year, David Malpass. I mean, I think the Fed EJ is right. The Fed played its cards all wrong. No question about that. Now, David, the question here is what to do about it. It's Bidenflation. January was Mr. Biden's last month in the economy, allegedly, whatever he was or wherever he is. But now President Trump's got to deal with it. What should they do?
They should say that they want the dollar to be strong and stable. We have to look at gold. It was going up throughout that period. And back to EJ's point, it was not only what the Fed was doing, but remember what Biden was doing. He was adding workers like crazy and putting on layers and layers of regulation. So what we should do now is reverse a lot of the harmful inflationary Biden policies. And Trump is doing that really fast right now. And then as we go forward, build a whole policy around a strong and stable dollar and a reserve currency for the U.S. That's going to be best for investment into the U.S. And it's going to make us even stronger. It will be self-fulfilling as we do it. If they came out tomorrow and said we have a strong and stable dollar policy, bond yields would be able to go down because they would know we're going to pay for the debt and do more production as we go forward.
Well, I like that. I mean, I like that calculus. Just don't know that they're going to do it. I mean, they never have, but it's a wonderful idea. The other thing is, Senator Cramer, how about we get the program, the whole Trump, the complete program through? Lower tax rates will boost production on the supply side. That's counterinflationary. David mentioned deregulation across the board. Energy production with more deregulation. Elon Musk, Doge, he's trying to cut spending left and right. He's had a fair amount of success, no matter what these left-wing judges and all the Democrats are doing. Let's put that whole package together, okay, including the reciprocity on trade. That's pro-growth and counterinflationary and good for the middle-class blue-collar worker, and everybody live happily ever after. So I want the Senate to chime in with one big, beautiful bill, Mr. Cramer.
Well, first of all, it's because the Senate chimed in with their smaller bill that the House finally decided to step off of the sidelines and get onto the field. Second of all, I'm for whatever Mike Johnson can get passed, but the House budget already is ignoring what you and I have talked about before, and that, of course, is current policy baseline.
Yeah.
And we've got, if we believe in pro-growth supply-side tax policy, we shouldn't have to worry about the score. And when you consider that the CBO is the worst scorekeeper in history of the world, we should certainly not pay any attention to the score and move forward. I'm for whatever we can get done.
I say it every night.
Larry, your point, though, I said markets are emotional. Can you imagine the emotional response to extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and making them permanent? It'd be remarkable.
Well, that's I was just going to say, I have some great quotes about the why the House has to construct its own budget baseline, but we're going to save that for Byron Donalds and Katie Pavlich, and it's just coming right up. I know, it's a good point.
Larry,
it's
one
a very
more
good
word.
point.
One word.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
One word. Pipelines.
Pipelines.
We've got to produce more.
Yes, we have to produce more overall. I got it. I would, however, David Malpass, I'm going to say this to all of you. I support Mr. Trump's reciprocity. I think that's the best way. In his heart, he's a free trader, and reciprocity is the best way to go about it. There's a lot of details that have to be filled in. We can wait a month and a half for the details. But I want to see him talking about tax cuts again, fellas. Yep. I hate saying it. I don't want to sound like a broken record. It's only been about 45 years. But you know what? Supply-side tax cuts work. Minimal regulation works. Budget restraint works. But the whole package, tax cuts, growth, higher wages, okay? I'd like him to get back on that message, E.J. Antoni. I'll single you out for this.
Larry, 100%. I think you're absolutely right. We got to get energy production up. We got to get spending and the deficit under control, right? And we got to get growth up. This is why Scott Bessent, our Treasury Secretary, his 3-3-3 plan, I think, really hits the nail on the head. These have to be the main items that we get across the finish line, and not just in terms of executive policy, but also in terms of this reconciliation package.
Yeah. Growth, tax cuts, Laffer curve. All right, E.J. Antoni, thank you. David Malpass, Senator Kevin Cramer, you all terrific sports. Appreciate it very much.